Thank you, Josh. Good to be here today on this 40th day of the counting of the Omer. And so I want to begin today with a story that relates to the divine dimensions of this 40th day of the Omer. So we are this week focusing on the divine sphera, the divine dimension of Yesod, meaning connection, foundation. Where is our rootedness in our experience? And today's mystical dimension that is kind of refracted through that is Hod, which we're going to talk about. It has many different meanings. I'm going to focus today on the midah, the concept and the character trait of humility. So humility through how we are connected in the world, how we are connected to each other. Once there was a monastery on a mountain high above a small town in Italy. The monks there were hardworking. They cultivated grapes and fruits of all sorts. They ate little, slept little, and meditated 9 times a day. And they were deeply connected to each other. For years, the fruits of their labors sustained their venture. They sold their grapes and fruits and used the income to plant again and to maintain themselves and their beautiful home. But then things changed. Young monks entered the monastery. Elders took sick or passed away. Indolence, indecision, and changing leadership eroded confidence. Arguments and insults drove wedges between the brothers. People lost their sense of humility. Contention replaced cooperation, and soon the monastery was in deep trouble. Some left, others stayed off by themselves, isolated and solitary. Now the work was done poorly, if at all, and not at all on time. The abbot, fearing that the monastery might be shut down, called upon an old friend, a rabbi from the nearby township, for advice. The rabbi came to the monastery to visit, and after several days of observing and noting, the rabbi asked the abbot if he could speak to all the monks together. "My dear friends," the rabbi began, "you are in a perilous situation. There's no money, you're demoralized. You might have to close this lovely place down and go elsewhere. There's one thing that I do know. In a vision, I was given a very clear and distinct message. I was told that one of you is the Messiah." A gasp and a hush fell over all of the brothers. Their eyes darted back and forth in search of who the special one might be. Could it be the abbot? He'd been here for decades, and under his watch, the place had fallen apart. Well, but he called the rabbi for advice, so maybe he was the Messiah. Could it be the new monk who just arrived, or the winemaker, or the silent monk who made the soup every week? Who could say? Each one of them thought to themselves, one of us is the Messiah, but which? Yet, if it is one of us, we must change our approach to one another. For who would ever want to insult or deride or discount the Messiah? So they began speaking kindly to each other, with respect, even honor. Sharing, helping, taking turns became commonplace. Smiles erased frowns. And now the gardens and fields were filled with diligent workers. Even the food tasted better. The work hours flew by and the prayers took on a new vital rhythm. The new vibe in the monastery filtered down to the townspeople. A few of them made their way up the mountain to see for themselves how beautifully the brothers were all connected to each other, treating each other from a true place of humility. The townspeople's reports brought even more visitors, and soon dozens of people came. And while there, they'd buy a jar of preserves, a bottle or 2 of wine, some candles, flowers, beautifully woven material. And before long, the monastery was thriving and hardly recognizable from just a short time before. That's a story called The Rabbi's Gift by Scott M. Peck. And I'll, in a moment, we'll share the link to that story. But it came to mind for me because in the divine aspect of this week's counting of the Omer, Yesod is the foundation of connection, right? So it's a reminder that we're all connected to each other, and these monks in the story were no exception. So, of course, we all know that connection in general is vital and important, but how do we actually do it in life? How do we maintain strong connections to what and to who are important day in and day out? Today's sphera of Hod, humility, infuses Yesod, connection. Humility, as the monks learned from the rabbi, leads back to stronger connections. Each of the monks approached each other as if they were Mashiach, as if they were the person who could bring healing and redemption to a world who so badly needs it. And they realized just how much they wanted that healing and redemption, and how the potential for that could be contained in any human being they came into contact with. I'll never forget when my two oldest children each had their baby naming. Two girls named by Rabbi Bradley Shavit Artson, who some of you may know. He was our congregational rabbi when our first two children were born. At each one of their baby namings, he said, each of these children could be the Mashiach, right? When a baby is born and is welcomed into the Jewish community and into the world, tradition has it that this could be the Messiah. This could be the person who brings the world out of a place of suffering, hardship, hunger, poverty, injustice, and usher in a new era of redemption. And of course, we all chuckle at that. We hear that in the baby naming, yet we're reminded of what that potentiality is that's right in front of us in that moment. And so today I want to offer a kavanah for the 40th day of the Omer to ground us in our practice of connection through humility, or humility through connection. You can take it in whatever way speaks to you the most today. This is written by my colleague, Rabbi Jeff Goldwasser, who, like me, is a part of the IJS Clergy Leadership Program. And he wrote this kavanah, this piece of guiding text to help ground us in the 40th day of the Omer, to focus on what humility and connection means for us. So I'd like to ask Kat to go ahead and screen share, and I'm going to read the entire thing out loud. So if you can't see it, no worries. But if you're a visual person and you'd like to see that, you'll have access to that. And you'll also see on the link that there's a link on the source sheet. There's a link to the story I shared too, if you want to look at that later. And so here's Rabbi Jeff Goldwasser. On this day, I think about connecting with other people in a way that really allows me to see who they are. I remember how easy it is for my ego to cloud the way I perceive others, thinking first, and my interests, my desires, and my assumptions come first before I bother to see the world through the other person's eyes. Letting go of ego is one of the most difficult spiritual challenges we face. We live our whole lives locked into being just one person. We never get to take off the lens of our ego to try on the experience of the world from another person's point of view. It's so difficult to get out of our own way. And yet there is hardly anything that is more richly rewarding in life than connecting so deeply with another person that we see the world as if it were new, as if we had never seen anything else before. In order to achieve a connection to another person that is that deep, it is necessary first to let go of our ongoing fascination with ourselves. In order for me to rise to the heights that are possible when I identify with another, I first have to have the humility to recognize that not everything is all about me. On this 40th day of the counting of the Omer, I commit to keeping my focus and attention on others. I commit to noticing my preconceptions about others and to let go of those images and thoughts. I commit to trying to see the world through the eyes of another. Rabbi Jeff Goldwasser, and his name is linked there to the source online where you can find his other kavanot about all the counting of the days of the Omer. And I also want to just call our attention to the bottom quote before we head into our quiet. This is a beautiful quote by C. Otto Schwarmer, who is the founder of the Presencing Institute, based in Berlin. And he has this beautiful concept that can help ground our practice as a part of his theory university, philosophy of transformation and change that he puts out into the world. He talks about it like this: the shift from ego system to ecosystem awareness requires a journey that involves walking in the shoes of others and attending to the three instruments of inner knowing: open mind, open heart, and open will. And so that is what our sit is about. It is about grounding ourselves in moving from ego system to ecosystem, because an ecosystem is a place in which we are all connected to each other. And it's no longer about just one person or one ego. It's about how we're all connected to each other. And through that connection, that's where the humility is absolutely essential for the open mind, open heart, and open will. So I ask that you find your connection at this point, your yesod, to your seat, to your back, to the chair, to your cushion, to your feet, grounded in the earth if you're standing or sitting, and to enter into this ecosystem of quiet connection to each other.
Thank you, Susan. Please stick around for a conversation with Susan and me about your reflections, experience with the practice today. We're going to give an opportunity now for those who are reciting Kaddish to do so. If you want to put the name of anyone that you are holding in heart or mind today, as you say Kaddish in the chat, please do so. We're going to put up the text here on the screen. And then, since I'm running my own tech support today, because Kat had to step out, we will just, here we go. Invite you if you need to, if you'd like to unmute, you can feel welcome to do that. There we go. And allow participants to unmute themselves. There we go. So you can unmute yourself if you'd like to join me, and we'll recite Kaddish together. Yitkadal.
Amen.
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 Great. So, stop sharing. And all right, now we're back. There we go. And I think Susan can unmute herself, I think.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, so we're back. Terrific. So yeah, I have to run my own tech support here for a minute, as Kat had to run over and host something, help with something else that's going on. So Susan, thank you so much for that practice and for that teaching on like grounding into connection. And I wonder if you want to just say, a little bit more. A number of folks, everybody's been asking for the source sheet. I think you got the source sheet. I think I've posted it about 5 times, but if you still need it, let me know. But a lot of people were clearly very intrigued by this kavanah from Rabbi Jeff Goldwasser. And I wonder for you, if you want to reflect on this sort of letting go of ego and opening up for, sort of the interconnection and that notion of yesod. Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more for you of how that shows. How that's shown up.
Sure. So I first discovered, I don't know why I always want to put a W in Sharmer's name. I think it's probably Sharmer is how you pronounce his last name. I first discovered him as a thinker and a philosopher and really a change artist when I was introduced to something called Theory University, which I mentioned briefly So Theory University, which is a model for transformation and change that he created, is where this language emerges from. And so I'll just give you a brief, and you can go to the link and look at more information on the Presencing Institute, which is a part of MIT. But basically the idea is there is a U, the letter U. And when you are considering change, knowing that nothing ever stays the same, right? But you feel stuck, you want to get from one side of the U all the way around to the other side of the U. There's a very precise methodology that he lays out for doing that. When you're launching the transformation process on one side of the letter U, this shift from ecosystem to ecosystem is an essential part of what he teaches. So if you think of it this way, if you draw a circle, right, and you put a dot in the middle, that's often how most of us kind of live our lives, right? It's very human, like, okay, the circle's where we are, and I'm the dot, I'm in the middle of the circle, right? So it's about me. And one of the ways he illustrates the shift from ecosystem to ecosystem is that the dot moves out from the middle of the circle out towards the edge of the circle to the edge of the ecosystem to look at the ego or the organization as from a different perspective. And then eventually the dot moves outside the circle so that you can really get, you know, kind of the balcony view of yourself and of the transformation that you're trying to help either an individual or an organization go through. So that's a little bit, Josh, about Otto Scharmer and this beautiful idea of moving from ego to eco.
I'm curious to hear from others, you know, in your experience and with this teaching and during the sit, how that sort of what your experience was and where there may be, you know, blocks for that. I mean, Susan, you know, for you, are there pieces in your practice that you feel like you have to bring particular attention to make that move? Given that most of us, I think, when we wake up in the morning, you know, we start with what's going on in our body, and like, you know, we naturally, like, that's where we start from. And so to make that move is clearly like the work of spiritual practice. I'm wondering, like, in your own, you know, as you're sitting, what like just beyond awareness, are there other things that you find have been helpful to help you make that shift?
Yeah, I was saying, somebody already said to me today, I was explaining to them about how I was nervous about a specific occasion coming up in my life, both nervous and excited. And someone I was talking to about this reminded me, they said, yeah, the other people coming into this situation, right, are also have a lot of different feelings and emotions coming in. It's such a simple reminder, right, of like, I'm not the only dot in the circle. And what does it mean to move out and to look and say, oh, there's all these other people who might be feeling a mix of the same emotions and trepidation that I'm feeling. So for me, Josh, when I was sitting today, I was those feelings and reminders were floating in and out of my space, my breath, of like, oh yeah, I'm not alone. Reminding myself that I'm not alone. I'm connected to others through an ecosystem. And of course, that goes hand in glove with when these thoughts come in meditation, we don't chastise ourselves, right? They come in and they go out, and they come in and they go out, and we sit with compassion for ourselves and for others.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm glad that folks have pointed out the chat was disabled before. Now it's abled, so you can please chat in your own questions and your own experience with this. I mean, I'm also struck by, you know, so many of the practices that we have. A familiar version of practices that we work with is, you starting with ourselves and then bringing to mind maybe somebody else who, an individual to whom we then want to direct, that same practice or give that same bracha, or an increasing circle, adding folks, to that circle that we might want to both receive from and give to. And so that this notion of attunement to the relationship with others, right, that's going on is one that, many of the practices that we work with kind of lead us in that direction. And it makes me also think about like the notion of the Talmudic teaching about the Shekhinah is present, in a group of 10 that are, praying together, and then like in a group of 3 that are saying the grace after meals, or even in a group of 2 that are studying Torah together, but that somehow the Shekhinah requires some sort of interpersonal, maybe it's the 2 kruvim, the 2 cherubs that are facing each other, but that there's a relational aspect, a profoundly relational aspect to making present making manifest the divine presence.
And sometimes we just want to be alone and we don't want those connections.
Right.
Or we want to turn our back on that, right? And think, oh, that's too much. That's overwhelming. I don't want that, right? But it's actually through, I guess I'm kind of reconnecting today with this word system, which is something we have throughout our lives. It's such a word we take for granted, right? But it underscores that things are connected. There isn't just this one component over here, right? But there are systems. And sometimes we want to absent ourselves from the system because we're on overload, or we feel uncomfortable, or there's suffering or pain. But coming back, barachamim tashuv, as we say, right? Like coming back with compassion back to the system to try to re-engage or reconnect, whatever that system is, whether it's a friendship or a larger group of people, or that's the work over and over again, even when we want to give up.
Mm-hmm. There's a few comments that have come in here in the chat, and a lot of them have to do with this question of sort of balancing, right? It's not about self-effacement and complete other orientation, or about complete sort of egocentrism, but this notion of a balance, or a healthy interdependence. And Lori has a question: giving in the ecosystem requires quite natural and seems quite natural and organic, but receiving from the ecosystem feels challenging, selfish, generous, or ungenerous, maybe, egocentric. Would you please speak to that? She raises that question.
Oh, wow. Josh, I bet you would have a lot to say about that too. But I think we look around us, even in nature, the exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen, right? Like there are so many examples of where there is this mutual exchange that's actually not only nice, it's like absolutely essential. And I think one of the things about moving that I've seen in this transformation work of moving from ecosystem to ecosystem is that once you see yourself as connected, you actually have the capacity to receive way more, making yourself vulnerable to other input, other relationships, the learning that happens. So I can understand why the receiver might feel like, what's my motivation here? But if we view it as essential to the system, that there's that exchange, then it kind of removes that sense of this is selfish, and also that I don't want that, right? Like what happens when we open ourselves up to the ecosystem and we receive information or stimuli that we don't like, right? But that open heart, open mind, open will is like, well, that's what it means to be connected, is to somehow receive that.
I wonder if you can actually, it just occurs to me on those 3 things that he talks about, right? Mind, heart, and will. Mind and heart, I think, is, those are ones we talk about all the time. Will is a little, less common, maybe. And I wonder if you can just comment for it. I mean, like obviously we have the word for that in Hebrew, ratzon, and we have certainly a lot of teachings about aligning our ratzon with our will, with the divine will. I think in our work, the notion of talking about language about divine will becomes theologically problematic. I wonder what you make of like that language of will, and how's it different than mind or heart?
Yeah, that's so funny, because with this text, of course, there is no Hebrew to go back to, although you raised up the Hebrew word ratzon, which is beautiful. But since this did not emerge from a Jewish text,
Right.
So I think this is a great tie-in for meditation, because one of the critiques of meditation is that we're going to sit here and just take care of ourselves and focus on ourselves, and the world's just going to pass us by. Like there's not going to be, because it's all about just sitting and being in the moment and all those things, right? But we know, at least intellectually, that our sitting is supposed to prepare us for action in the world. It's not meant to be all passive all the time. It's a receiving that allows us to then go forth and have the will to act in the world. So when I see this, this level, the open will that Otto is talking about in that quote, I see that as, where do I get the strength and the inspiration to take action? Because his philosophy is very future looking. There's a really wonderful quote. I'll share it and then I'll put it in the chat. He says, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed yet. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed yet. So if that's not a call for redistributive justice, I'm not sure what is, right? The idea is that we have to look to the future. We have to have the will to transform and to act, because there's so much of it that is so needed in our world.
Okay, and then there's one more question, which I think you sort of, which you said, and you're typing in the quote here, but is it okay not to engage sometimes? And I think you sort of spoke to that, that there are moments, obviously, when we do need time and space in order, to heal or to recharge, etc. And if you want to get the last word in on that piece, because this notion of engagement is obviously very important, but there's healthy disengagement as well, correct?
Yeah, and watching and listening. And I think our practice is very much about that. One of my wise people in my life once said to me, sometimes you have to step away from a relationship to redraw those boundaries, right? So it's not for the intent, perhaps, of staying away forever, but that you're taking that time so that you can step back into a redefined relationship with that person and find a better path forward. So now we all need a break sometimes, for sure.
Beautiful. All right. Well, that's a wonderful place for us to wrap this up. Susan, always a pleasure to have you here. And everyone, thanks for being here. And we will be back tomorrow, same time, same channel.
Thank you, Josh.
Right.